All right, thank you very much for having me, and thanks for joining me for your lunch break. Yeah, so this research is in that area of, nope, something happened. This is in this area of my research in which I look at how political parties adopt campaign strategies, what kind of strategies they adopt, not really looking at the consequences in this project, which is something I'm interested in as well. It is co-authored with Daniel Weitzel, Yasmin Goz, and Elisa Frelin. Daniel and Yasmin used to be PhD students at UT Austin. And back in 2020, early 2020, before the pandemic started, actually, I asked them to collect tweets of candidates, UK candidates, for the 1 month campaign period in the UK before the 15, 17, and 19 elections. And they did that. And in the meantime, the pandemic happened. They graduated. They went on to their postdocs and then tenure track jobs, had a baby. And I was busy with all the other projects. So 5 years later, I said, what are we doing about this project? So now we are actually, we restarted on this project. And this is kind of like the first attempt at trying to understand how political candidates talk on Twitter. And especially, well, X now, but back then it was Twitter. So I'm going to refer it as Twitter. How do they talk on Twitter? And then which groups of voters do they try to represent in their tweets during the campaign periods in the UK? All right. So social media, of course, provides politicians with direct, unmediated communication channels to the public, which allows them to have message control and also amplify their messages strategically to reach to their constituencies. And a growing body of literature examines politicians' digital campaign strategies. Yet we still, I don't know why, okay. Yet we still do not fully understand which issues politicians emphasize in their social media campaigns, and why they allocate their limited campaign period. And in Europe, this is European Center research, so you are probably familiar with this. The campaign periods are very short in European countries, as opposed to US, which never ends. But yeah, that limited election campaign period, on what issues do they focus on which issues do they spend their energy on? So our research question in this paper, in this first attempt paper, is whose issue priorities do the political candidates in the UK emphasize in their tweets? Okay, and the results of this research has, of course, important implications for the representation literature. Whose preferences do they represent? And I'm going to show you today that it's mostly the co-partisans of the political party that they represent, but with significant attention also dedicated to undecided voters as well. So that is an important implication. But of course, also in order to be able to understand what kind of strategies do parties adopt, and eventually to understand whether those strategies work as well. And that is what I've been working on in the past 20 years, trying to understand the campaign strategies of political parties. In my own research, we know that from my own research and others that campaigns affect voters' perceptions of party positions and their vote choices. And it's important to understand because of that, what kind of strategies they follow, even though these periods, as I mentioned in the previous slide, are pretty limited in time, very short periods, often lasting between 2 to 4 weeks in many Western European countries. In Portugal, it's 2 weeks. In the UK, it's 4 weeks, which forces candidates and parties to focus their attention, the limited time that they have, on specific issues, platforms, and strategies. As I said, I've been working on this research for the past 20 years, but mostly looking at it from the political parties' angle. What do political parties do more generally? And my research and others' research suggests that they largely follow their manifesto pledges during the campaigns. They focus their attention on those issues they own, which there is a big literature on the issue ownership strategy. These issues that would provide them with a competence advantage. Or they may emphasize those issues that are evaluated as highly important by the public, which it has been called the riding the wave strategy in the literature. But we are moving beyond political parties in this paper. We are looking at individual politicians, political candidates, and what do they talk about? And individual politicians should also strategically decide which issues they should emphasize more during this limited campaign period. And this is especially true, of course, in candidate-centered systems like the UK and the US. But even in mainland Europe, the Western European political systems that, parties have been the most important actors, what we are seeing is that a lot of personalization of politics is happening. And candidates are becoming important, candidate strategies. And with the age of social media, of course, it's also, this research, we argue, has also important implications for other parliamentary systems as well. So whose issue priorities should they address? And here we are looking at 4 groups of voters. The common suspects, of course, the usual suspects are the general public. They should really try to appeal to everybody, to the median voter, to the general public. And we know from research from both US and comparatively as well that politicians use online platforms with the general electorate in mind, even though the actual users of social media may have specific characteristics and interests. And this is because candidates likely do not know who's exactly using social media, other than probably younger demographics they suspect would be using social media. But still, it's a very difficult task for politicians to know what are their preferences and who are these people and what kind of preferences they have. So general public is one of the common groups, of course, common suspects here. But also co-partisans. Co-partisans are the people who identify with the party. And we know that positioning closer to co-partisans maximizes electoral support. So they should really target their own co-partisans' preferences. And Barbera et al. Research, that seminal piece from 2019, looking at US legislators, suggests that their issue agendas on Twitter follow the issue agendas of their own party supporters more than anybody else. And in terms of gathering information, it's easier to gather information about the supporters of the party, because what we know is that those are the people who preach to the choir, who are trying to reach out to the politicians and try to tell them what they want. So it's easier to find more information about co-supporters, of course. So these are common suspects, of course, but then there are other groups of voters. Increasingly, we know that a lot of people are making up their minds in terms of who to vote for during the last week of the campaign or even on the day of the election. And this increasing share of citizens who are making up their minds pretty late, what we call undecided voters, are an important target, because you need to convince them that you are going to represent their interests in office. So talking about their preferences would be very important as well, and we'll see whether candidates do this. And then finally, in this paper, we are also focusing on potential rival party supporters. Partisanship and strength of partisanship has been declining, and volatility of elections have been increasing. So even though they might have been voting for other parties, there may be some people among these rival party supporters that the candidates can convince to vote for them. Who might be some targets here? It may be either electorally closest rival party. So in the UK context, usually in many districts, the top contenders are either the Labour candidate or the Conservative candidate. So we are curious whether candidates, say a Labour Party candidate, targets the Conservative Party supporters' preferences, which is the electorally closest in that district. If a different party is electorally closest, we measure that party's preferences. Or is it the ideologically closest rival party? So usually, like, for instance, Green Party doesn't really do that well, but the Green Party probably is closest to the Labour Party in terms of the preference, ideological preferences. So we are wondering whether they would target the Green Party supporters' preferences more than the Conservative Party, which is their main rival in that district, potentially. So we look at that as well. So it's pretty descriptive or exploratory in this sense. This paper is trying to figure out whose interests they follow. At the same time, in terms of those four groups, we have some expectations that general public and especially co-partisans should get most attention compared to undecided voters and rival party supporters. Because again, the uncertainty, the lack of information is there. If they lack information on specific groups' preferences, they should probably pay more attention to the general preferences, the median voter preference. And mobilization is probably more important goal for candidates on Twitter. And because of that, probably co-partisans are the most important target. I actually recently found this Labour Party's digital campaigning guide, which directly states this, and I'm quoting, "Twitter is less effective than Facebook," the guide says, "as a channel for persuading undecided voters. Twitter users, including journalists and opponents who view and follow political content, are more likely to have well-developed political opinions in the first place." So if this is true, if they believe in this statement, then they should really not try to appeal to the undecided voters or rival party supporters per se, but really emphasize co-partisans in order to be able to mobilize them in the elections for their turnout. So therefore, we expect the closest attention to be paid to the co-partisans, general public, or the co-partisans, less so to the undecided and rival party supporters' preferences. Okay, one other aspect of this is it the national preferences, regional preferences, district preferences? What should the candidates follow? And given that most opinion polls conduct their surveys nationwide, most information on voters pertains to co-partisans, undecided, general public across the country nationwide. Yet at the same time, we know for a long time, we've been knowing this, that voters cannot be regarded as scattered at random over the various constituencies. And especially in countries, Westminster countries or majoritarian countries like UK and US, we know that the preferences vary across districts, constituencies. So mobilizing co-partisans in the region and convincing additional voters in the region or the district to vote for the candidate are critical. And we know that if they can successfully do that, that behavioral localism research suggests that it actually helps parties win, candidates win the elections. All right. Why do I say region? Why do I say region and district? Because we are in the process of getting the MRP models work for the district level to get the district preferences, but I only have regional preferences coded for this presentation, but it's coming up. So in a couple of weeks, hopefully, we'll know the district preferences part. So what we argue here is that candidates emphasize those issues that the general public perceives as highly salient, co-partisans perceive as highly salient, undecided, or the co-partisans of the ideologically and electoral closest rival parties perceive as highly salient, especially those in the politicians' region and district, is what we expect. Again, as I said, regional results today, district results to come, and especially by paying more attention to the issues of the general public and co-partisans and less so to the undecideds and other parties' partisans. Any questions so far? All right, so data. We are using British Election Study Survey. The panel survey data has been going on since 2014. And for each election, national election, 15, 17, and 19 elections, which are the dotted lines, there were multiple waves happening before and after the survey. We are using the before waves because we like to know the preferences before the candidates talk about them. So we combine those two waves of preferences. And here the question we use is the most important issue question, the common question that what is the most important issue that the country faces today or these days. And then the answers to that question will determine what is the proportion of the general public, co-partisans, undecideds who prefer different issues. And BES organizes those issues into 25 categories, and that's what we are using, 25 issue categories. Oops, skip something here. Yeah, so we use the BES data to generate the issue preferences for all these subgroups of voters, both at the national level and at the regional level, and MRP models for district preferences are on the way. So what are the most important issues mentioned by the people? This is all three elections combined, which is not surprising. 2017 and 19 were the height of the Brexit debate in the UK. So Europe was getting a lot of attention as the most important issue the country faces. But if you look at the separate results, 15 and 19, 17 looks very similar to 19 as well. Like in 2015, it was immigration. I don't know whether you can see in the back, but this is immigration that was getting a lot of attention. This is average voter is in the first column, and Labour supporters, Conservative supporters, Lib Dem supporters, Green supporters, and undecideds are at the end. This dark one is BNP, the far-right party in the UK. Their supporters really care about immigration, asylum issue, of course, and UKIP as well. But other issues as well, other economic factors, healthcare gets, of course, NHS gets a lot of attention, inequality gets a lot of attention, and similarly, there's some variation in there as well. All right. And then in terms of candidate issue emphasis data, we used a database by Democracy Club called Who Can I Vote For Register to identify the candidates, all candidates who ran in the UK elections for the 15, 17, and 19 elections. There were who had Twitter accounts. There were about 3,000 to 3,500, depending on the election, candidates who ran in these elections. And as you can see, about slightly less than half of them had Twitter accounts in 2015, and about 2/3 of them had Twitter accounts in 2019, and less so in 2017. Maybe it's because it was snap election and nobody was expecting it to happen, and so some people who didn't have Twitter accounts didn't have the opportunity to open one, probably. All right, so if you look at tweets, number of tweets by political party, Labour Party's candidates tweet most compared to other parties, but there's quite a bit of variation. Blue is Conservative, this is Green, that's Liberal Democrats, orange, and other parties there. And then smaller parties, of course, have smaller number of candidates. So how do we classify? We use LLM to classify. We have about 750,000 tweets. And what we use is those 25 issue categories from the BES data. Our tweets include quotes and retweets as well. This is something that we like to look into, like, who are they retweeting? How many times are they retweeting each other? Are they retweeting the party line? Is something that I'm really interested in exploring further. And then we use the chat completion interface of the OpenAI API with the GPT-4 mini model and 5.4 to that's not me. I don't do that. All right. Okay, so what are the most discussed issues? And this is again combined, 2015, 17, 19 combined. Campaign performance gets, of course, a lot of attention. This means a post like, we are going to win, or we are polling this much, and no issue mention at all. If there's ever an issue mentioned, even if they say, you need to vote for us if you want better healthcare, then that goes to healthcare. So this is only tweets that include only campaign performance discussions. But otherwise, of course, this is Brexit Party, that they spend almost all their time talking about Europe. Conservatives talk about economic issues, social policy issues, healthcare, Europe as well. Green Party, of course, environment. So this is kind of like, are we actually coding what we are intending to code? Yeah, I mean, Green Party talking more about environment, that convinces me that something is going right here. We used students also to check how our LLM performs. We had 3 undergraduate students who coded a subset of the tweets, and then we compared with the LLM results. And then Daniel, my co-author, also hand-coded and compared to LLM. His coding was the best match with LLM. Of course, students had like some variation, but it wasn't bad at all. All right. At this point, you may say, well, are there actually meaningful differences between undecided voters, co-partisans, general voter preferences, other parties' supporters, and so on and so forth. And yes, they are highly correlated, right? Of course, like general voter preferences and the labor co-partisan preferences are pretty highly correlated. And that's why we cannot run all of them together in the same model and compare coefficients. But there is some interesting variation. So this one shows that like most of the, let me see. This figure shows the most important issue evaluations of each group of respondents in the UK across 3 elections. These are the issues and these are the subgroups of respondents. So there's quite a bit of variation across different co-partisans and average voter. Yes, all of them care about immigration, but UKIP supporters most. And environment, Europe, everybody cares in 2017 and 19, but then there are other issues as well that show some variation. This is very messy. Like if you have any ideas how to show this better, I would appreciate that. All right, so the model then is as follows. We have the proportion of each candidate's tweets in each election on each issue. That's the dependent variable. It's issue emphasis, right? So issue emphasis, what is the proportion of their Twitter campaign they spend on immigration, they spend on environment? That's the dependent variable. And the main independent variable is the most important issue proportion. And that is, we run this model separately for general voters, for co-partisans of the party, for rival party supporters, for undecided separately. And then we have a bunch of control variables. We control for the Twitter use in that district, in that constituency. We control for the gender of the candidates. There's no difference. Women and men speak pretty similarly in terms of issue emphasis. We control for unemployment rate in that constituency, change in unemployment rate. We control for change in winner's vote share, the margin of victory. The more competitive the district is, likely they may speak differently or pick up issues differently. And I have a conclusion slide in which I would love to hear your opinions on which direction we should push this paper to. I'll talk more about that. And then a bunch of fixed effects for the party fixed effects, issue fixed effects, election fixed effects are all in there as well. Well, candidate fixed effects should be in there too. There's candidate fixed effect too, I believe. Okay, all right, the results. This is the regional, again, we look at the national, we look at the regional, not yet district. Regional preferences, again, separate regressions for each group. What we see is that rival party supporters don't really get much attention in terms of, these are coefficient estimates in terms of issue representation by the candidates, but general average voter gets quite a bit. Co-partisans are the group that gets the most attention, and undecideds is still quite significant and positive. Substantively, what does that mean? 0.25. What does that mean? It means that the average person, the average candidate in our data tweets about 200 tweets in 1 month period. It ranges between 1 to like 5,000. Some crazy person never stops tweeting. But anyway, so that is about average is about 200. So if a person's constituency, co-partisans preferences change so that now 20% more people care about immigration, we expect an average candidate that tweets about 200 tweets to tweet about like 6-7 more tweets on the issue. Is this substantive? I don't think so. Like that's not like 6-7 tweets out of 200 for a 20% increase on the issue. I don't know, like it's not very strong evidence in my opinion. And the results are very similar for national representation, super similar actually, almost 0.25. So again, it's maybe because with regional and national, we are measuring the same thing. When we move to the district, maybe we find something else that is to come. We'll see. So at this point, you may say, well, what about the social media users? So one extension we did was looking at whether politicians use social media as a campaign tool to attract those voters who are on social media. So who are these people? It may be younger voters, or actually BES has a question whether the respondent has a Twitter account and whether they use Twitter. So we use that question as well to look at whether there's any variation in terms of who they respond to, and not much difference actually. So younger people, and these are average voter, co-partisans, and undecided voters, younger people get more attention if you focus on average voter, but that's about it. Otherwise, these are regional, those are national results. The same, like no difference in terms of age. And in terms of Twitter users, again, no difference. So candidates do not really pay attention to younger voters' preferences on Twitter or Twitter's user preferences. All right, so what we still don't know, the next steps, and this is where I would love to hear what you think, which directions we should go to. First, again, looking at the district level, that's the models are running. It turns out MRP takes a while. We control for candidate gender and their party performance, but I am very curious, and we coded actually for each candidate, whether they are incumbents and whether they ever served in the House of Commons before. So we have information on whether they are newbies or experienced politicians. And I expect that the newbies respond more to the national preferences and general preferences, whereas experienced politicians have better contact with their co-partisans in their district, so they should be responding more to their district co-partisans. I'm also interested in the competitiveness and safeness of a district, how it shapes the behavior of the candidates on Twitter, looking at especially like if it's competitive, I expect them to emphasize the district preferences more than the national preferences because the district is competitive. We also need to compare the candidates' Twitter rhetoric with the party line. We are in the process of trying to find out the tweets of the political parties and party leaders. Elon Musk doesn't make it easy, but we are trying. So once we have that information for all the parties, I'd like to know who is deviating in order to represent their co-partisans in their district and who is following the party line. Again, I expect competitiveness come into play. In competitive districts, I expect them to follow their own line, whereas in safe districts, they likely are going to follow the party line. And also, of course, in this paper, I showed you issue emphasis. So how much they talk about Europe, how much they talk about immigration, but of course, they may be pro-immigrant or anti-immigrant, pro-EU, anti-EU. I did not talk about positions at all. And that's, I'm less excited about pursuing. It's just too much work there. I'm more interested in this. But if you think that we are missing on that and we have to definitely focus on that, that's something that we can also do. And that's all I have today. Thank you so much.
Some time for questions. Okay.
So if I understood the statistics for each issue, there's a separate regression right now.
Right. So yeah,
as opposed to like a multicotomous probit or something like that. But the candidate is going to be allocating some fixed amount of space on their Twitter account. So I wonder whether or not taking account of what they de-emphasize and simultaneously what they emphasize is going to produce stronger results somehow.
It's proportion of their Twitter campaign dedicated to each issue. So it's not raw number to start with. However, I see what you're saying. And one thing that I'm interested in is this, the cosine similarity method that's coming up now, where these are the issue preferences of this group on the various issues, and all these groups different preferences, and then these are the issues that the candidate discuss, how much they overlap together, and then we can look at how competitiveness affects that, how newbie status affects that, and all that. So that's something I don't know much about the method, but that I heard that would be a solution to this problem. Mhm.
All right. I was a little bit surprised by the numbers that showed that the Labor candidates tweet so much more. And part of the reason why I was a bit surprised is because I seem to remember that at least in some continental European countries, it seems to be that the extremist party candidates tweet a lot more. So do you have an explanation for why the Labor candidates tweet more? And somewhat related to that, I was also wondering whether there are differences in your conclusions with respect to the different parties.
Mhm.
Well, the Dems were pretty high as well, it looked like.
Yeah, let's go back. So this is number of tweets summed together across all candidates. The thing is, not every, like SNP didn't have candidates, of course, in other parts of the UK, only Scotland. So that being small doesn't mean that those candidates were not tweeting a lot. Still, though, it's quite small number compared to, even if we take the candidate numbers into account. And then UKIP, was it? I don't think UKIP was, no, UKIP wasn't running candidates in every constituency either. So that's the other explanation, because this is just summed together across all candidates, and Labour and Conservative were running in every single 650 candidates, constituencies.
Yes, I wanted to make the case for, at the end you said that looking at it kind of in a spatial sense of where the tweets are, it's hard and it's like it's messier and so forth, but it seems like it might be worthwhile just because one of the things that would be interesting is it seems that there might be on any particular issue like a labor, like I noticed that Labor candidates are talking a lot about social the welfare sort of issues, it looked like, and so if it's the case that Labor, in a multi-dimensional issue space, if Labor is kind of like, it has issues that are sort of that are good for it in the sense that like most of Labor supporters support Labor on that issue. And then there are other issues where the Labor Party has to worry that like lots of their own voters actually don't like their platform very much. So it seems like it'd be nice to be able to show that they're emphasizing the issues that are kind of downhill in a sense for them, and then de-emphasizing the ones that are uphill. And if there's even kind of regional variation in that, which I think there would be, especially constituency level variation in that, then that would really be like that would yield, I think, some really interesting new insights. If it was if you could see that kind of there was this crafting of let's talk about a lot about the things that our own co-partisans, where we think we can mobilize them, and they agree with us. And there are these other issues where our own co-partisans are, in some parts of the country at least, in disagreement with us. Then it would seem like that would be a new and useful way a place to take this.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that party line angle that I mentioned, like measuring what the party has been tweeting and what the party leader has been tweeting, and then who is deviating, and when they deviate, whose preferences do they, and I suspect it's a district co-partisans' preferences are deviating from the party's line, right? So it's like, Texas politicians talking more conservatively than the rest of the country. So they should really do that. But yeah, this is already at the district level. We know the candidate's district. What we don't know is the district preferences of the voters, which is coming up with the MRP results. But then the party line is something that's missing that I'm hoping to gather more information.
Yeah, that was just something I wanted to ask you about. Like, I know you're waiting for the MRP results to be able to tell us about public opinion means or estimated public opinion at the district level. But if you just look at the tweets, everything you now have on the tweets at the district level, I'm just worried. I'm wondering, like, what is the standard deviation? Like, how much variation is there in how in what Labor candidates are doing in, say, central London versus some rural district and so.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Just like, have you taken a look at that? Yes.
No, no, we did not, and we also did not run the results separately. I mean, we have the party fixed effects, but I'd like to know the results separately, just by party as well, for Labor. And I think that gets at your point as well. Why are some parties tweeting more? Maybe they are trying different strategies. But then, yes, what you're saying is also getting to Gary's comment about like the distribution of issues they talk about, which may also mean that there are some issues they don't talk about in certain districts because it's so controversial that we are not really looking into those right now. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm really curious about how do you think about the role of Twitter in this study? Because if you compare, I mean, if you analyze maybe the speech, the public speech of these candidates, or how they speak to the audience on TV campaign,
Right.
whether you will get similar results about how they respond to the issues that they are, the whole public or their potential candidates will care about.
No, that's great. In that Labour Party digital campaign guideline, they were actually suggesting that the candidates should talk about the issues that are important for the party and issues that are important for their voters, amplify the messages they are trying to give in their door-to-door campaign using the social media. So amplify those messages. So if they are really doing that is a question. I don't actually know that, but if we can measure their speeches, what we know is that the legislators talk in the US, in the House of Representatives versus on Twitter, they vary quite a bit, right? Because the audiences are very different. But when it comes to the campaign, I expect less difference in terms of what they are saying door to door versus what they are saying on social media, unless the party has a strong whip. And if the party has a strong whip and really tells the people to use certain messages on their social media, they may say something else to the door-to-door campaign people and then publish something else on Twitter. But I don't know the answer to that question, but I think that's very interesting. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, you use that. Great. Sorry. So a small comment. I wonder if you can control for the number of Twitter followers that these candidates have, because that should have the same kind of effects as, or the same correlations as safe seats or sort of less experienced politicians. But I wanted to ask a broader question about so Twitter use here seems to be about the voters, but it could just as well be, the people who actually use Twitter are totally not representative of the electorate, and they're much more likely to be A, engaged, and B, to be journalists.
Yeah.
So you can imagine this is really about sort of managing the media message much more than it is about either mobilizing or persuading voters, very few of whom would ever see these messages. It could also be a tool in factional politics.
Yep. We do have, for a different project, we collected the newspaper coverage of the election campaigns. And that's something that I'd like to look at. Like, are the tweets also reflecting the media coverage? Is what you're saying correct? Which I expect it is correct, but I have the data. I can easily check that as well. Yeah.
It might be also, I know you're doing a lot here, but it might be in the British election study, it might be useful to look at the most informed partisans versus the less informed partisans, or the most engaged partisans versus the less engaged partisans. Like, that's just another of all the distinctions you're thinking about. That's
we used political interest to measure the most interested versus not very interested separately. We didn't find any effects there. No.
So how many people do you have in your sample who switch constituencies?
That we coded those as well. It's not controlled here, but it's possible, right, in the UK. So we have whether they are incumbents, whether they were, if they were not incumbents, whether they ever served in the House of Commons. And then if they did, which party and in which constituency. So we can actually detect exactly like where they moved to.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that the variance in the treatment agenda, what the constituents think, that arises from having changed your constituency is going to be more potent.
Definitely for that analysis, when we are going to look at the like competitiveness of the district or newbie status in the district, and how it affects what you talk about. We need to control for that variable for sure. Yeah.
One other small question.
Mhm.
Does it vary from one election to the other?
Oh, response?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I don't know. We did not run it separately for each election. We do have election fixed effects in there, but we did not run them separately. I'll look into that. It may be. It's possible because 17 came out of nowhere and they had very short period of time, so they may not be able to gather information as much as they could in 2015, where they were expecting that election to happen for a long time. So yeah, it will be good to look.
A question about
Twitter can be an echo chamber where the people you're reaching tend to be already bought into. Twitter also supports promoted tweets, which is advertising. You can tweet to people who aren't your followers. Are you able to segregate promoted tweets versus organic tweets to see if the messaging is any different?
I don't know whether it's possible to do that, but what we know is that which tweets were recoded and retweeted. So in that sense, we can actually look at like, are these organic tweets that come from the candidate or whether they are retweets of some other, either the party or somebody else. I don't know how to, we know the coded versus not coded organic tweets, but I don't think that we can separate 750,000 tweets into different categories of who they are retweeting, or maybe we can. Like I just, not methodologically advanced enough to be able to answer that question, but maybe my collaborators can. Yeah. But yeah, that's a great point. If they are retweeting newspaper articles, if they are retweeting some interest group tweets that, would help. Yeah.
wonderful. In that case, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, great. Thank you.